Hello everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of A Wee Piece, the official YouthLink podcast. My name is Dean Miller, and I'm very fortunate today to be joined by two members of the YouthLink staff team, Naomi Armstrong and Matthew McFadden. Thank you very much, both of you, for coming. Good to have you. And today we are going to be having a discussion on the theme of remembrance and the importance of remembering the past to inform the future. And as I'm sure you're all aware, November holds a very important date of Remembrance Sunday, where we remember the lives lost in the conflicts of World War I, World War II, and as well as more locally here in Northern Ireland, we're reminded of the lives lost during the Troubles, and especially at this time, the Remembrance Day bombing in 1987. So, we're interested in having this discussion on the importance of remembering past conflicts within the context of young people, specifically here in Northern Ireland. So we'll start this dialogue with yourself, Matthew. Can you just tell us a little bit about your own background in youth work and your own memories or experience of conflict here in Northern Ireland?
Thank you, Dean. It's good to be here. So my name is Matthew McFadden. I'm from Aughnacloy in County Tyrone. I live half a mile from the border from County Monaghan. I grew up in a small town not that far away called Ballygolly, a small rural area famous for the Ballygolly roundabout. If you haven't been, you need to take it in, folks. I'm married. I have married to Una for 15 years. I have 3 children. Daniel is almost 12, just started secondary school. Mary is in P6, loving life, and Celine is in P2, loving life even more, still at primary school. I've worked in YouthLink now, this is almost the end of my second month here. I've been connected with YouthLink for a long time and through a number of other roles as a trustee and also availing of the YouthLink training services. I suppose before that, I had worked in a Catholic high school as a chaplain, and before that, I worked in Catholic youth ministry, and have even been a teacher in a past life. But all very much associated with Catholic schools and Catholic youth ministry. My memory of the Troubles, as I say, I grew up in a rural area, very unique setting. There was just myself and my mother was disabled in a wheelchair. I don't like to say I'm a carer because that's not the full story, and that's for another podcast. My mother was a huge example, huge role model to me. She was a very devout Catholic. She had an extremely strong faith. Faith was really important, and a simple, beautiful faith that I'm unquestioning, unwavering, that I'm hugely jealous of, I have to say. I think those sort of people are dying out now, and it's a wee bit sad. So we lived in a rural area. Lived in a lane. Our next door neighbours were a family called the Andersons. The Andersons were absolutely great bakers, and I loved when I was a wee lad getting down to Anderson's house, and there used to be these tins sitting up on top of the cupboards, and they would pull down these tins, and you would get cake, buns, and whatever they put their hand to, whatever they baked was absolutely lovely. So they were just like us. There was no difference in the McFaddens and the Andersons. But I remember one day somebody told me that the Andersons were Protestants. I didn't question what a Protestant was, but it was the way that it was told. I knew that they were different, and I knew there was something uncomfortable. And I remember going into the house, and it just was never the same again. And it was a strange feeling. I don't think my mum or my granny would have been like that. They were good neighbours and they were good friends, but certainly somebody said something to me, and I can't remember who it was, and it changed things, and I just felt a wee bit less comfortable and less likely to go, and I have no idea why. My first memory then of the conflict would have been the local barracks. There was a bomb in the local barracks, And I can remember it was a Saturday evening and I was sitting at home and this bang that I had never heard the likes of before, and the house and the windows in the house absolutely shook. And I was just really scared. I had no idea what it was, but just really, really scared and really frightened. I didn't know what was going to happen. And my mother said to me, "It's all right. It's just a bomb. Just a bomb." Yeah. So that was my first experience. And I suppose over the next few days, you would have heard bits and pieces. I would have heard sort of terms that I never would have heard before: IRA, police, a explosion, and just from there on, those things, IRA, police, paramilitaries, explosions, shootings, became part of the vocabulary that I grew up in. My exposure to people was very Catholic. I had limited exposure to Protestants. We moved into the town, into a housing estate, and there would have been maybe out of a couple of hundred houses, there might have been 2 or 3 Protestant houses. So I didn't know too many Protestants. And just with the language that we were used, the conversations that I was caught up in, it led to a lot of fear and a lot of mistrust. I would have also been very reluctant to have any kind of trust in the police or the army. I was scared of police and I was scared of the army. Felt very uncomfortable when I was in their presence, felt very uncomfortable when we were stopped at checkpoints, and actually would have believed that, I suppose, stopped at a checkpoint, there would have been a chance that I could have been shot. Totally irrational. Nothing to justify that, but that was the belief. I don't know if I looked at on the IRA in a positive light, but I would have seen them as defenders, and that's the story and that's the narrative that I was hearing. One of the things, I suppose, I had family in Enniskillen, and my mum nursed in the Iron Hospital for a stage, so we had a big affiliation with Enniskillen, and I can remember the bomb on Remembrance Sunday. I didn't know what Remembrance Sunday was, but I remember the bomb, and I remember just thinking to myself that I knew this was wrong, and I knew this shouldn't have happened, and I was just shocked at that stage. And I suppose that began a journey, even though, what was I, 11 or 12 at the time, that began a journey of sort of trying to think of things a wee bit differently at that time, and it definitely had a profound effect on me. So it was the first time that I really ever took notice of Remembrance Sunday, and it was not something afterwards that I really would have had it had nothing, it was removed from me, it was nothing that had anything to do with me as far as I was concerned. The next time that I got a connection with Remembrance Sunday was when I went to Leeds to do my teacher training, and I went to Mass on Sunday morning, and I was down in good time, and there was a remembrance service at the Catholic Chapel in Leeds, and I was thinking, what's going on here? The remembrance services are just for Protestants. We're Catholics. What are they doing here? And again, I suppose you begin to think, yeah, where I live, maybe things are very different, and things are a wee bit different than other parts of the world. So that began my journey into teaching and into youth work. I think any sort of radicalization or any thoughts or any thoughts in the conflict would have come from home, or would have come from school, and certainly not from home. I believe that contrary to what we're led to believe, there's still a lot of that, just those half-truths and those half-told stories, and are still going on, and young people are still saying this, and there's still an attitude of we did this and we did that. The last thing, World War II, I didn't know a lot about World War II. World War II wasn't something that we talked about in school. I didn't know growing up, I didn't know a huge lot about it. Now, just the idea of World War II just makes me sad, and that there was a huge loss of life. I've been listening to the talk in the media at the minute about that a man that was killed in England, and the police officer had shot him. And amongst all of that, I think we're missing the point that somebody lost their life, and life is precious. And if anybody loses their life, it brings with it. It should bring with it a loss, whether that person is deemed as being good or being a not good. They're a child of God, and He created their life, and any loss of life isn't something to be debated about, or for political point scoring, or to make a point. I suppose the loss of life is a tragedy.
Wow, and it's just amazing to sort of hear the ways your background sort of, journey into sort of youth work and teaching and ministry kind of related to Remembrance Sundays in those ways and those memories of conflict. So same to you, Naomi, just a bit about your background, sort of how you got to where you are now, and any, particular memories you have of the conflict.
So my name's Naomi, and I'm from Fermanagh, a wee village called Etherney, and it's the Fermanagh border area. And I guess my childhood has been based around Fermanagh and Donegal, and later on a little bit up in Bangor. But yeah, my earliest childhood memories was travelling back and forth from my home to my grandparents' house, and remembering soldiers stopping us and also patrolling the sides of the road. And similar to Matthew, there was an element of uncomfortableness and fear whenever I seen them, but I knew that they were there for protection. But I felt like as a child that we were in trouble, or there was an uncomfortableness whenever I seen them. Moving then on, my earliest probably childhood memory from troubles was like the Oma bomb in 1998, and the fear was really tangible that day of that explosion, because my grandparents would have travelled to Oma quite regularly to do shopping. I remember that a day that we couldn't contact my grandparents, and just the unknown until we eventually was able to establish contact with them. And seeing footage of the toll of how many were killed, 29 people were killed and over 200 injured. And I think also like walking them streets between Oma and Enniskillen, where the Enniskillen bomb was, living in that area, I'm very mindful of what has happened before me, and the atrocities that has happened in the streets. And then off the back of the Enniskillen bomb, the Gordon Wilson, his words, "I bear no ill will, I bear no grudge," they were the powerful words to have spoke days after losing his daughter in the Enniskillen bomb. And then off the back of that, then the Enniskillen Spirit of Enniskillen was established, which was his legacy that he left. Coming out of that, and I was privileged to be able to participate on the Spirit of Enniskillen at the ages of 16, 17, and having the opportunity to go to Cyprus and journey along that path of good relations. And I guess as a child growing up, my mother gave me several opportunities where I had the privilege of encountering both sides of the community. I was brought up a Protestant. I attended church weekly, and many like Sunday school and Bible classes and Girls' Brigade. But I also had the opportunity to learn Irish dancing. I played tennis in a predominantly Catholic club. So I had the opportunities of meeting Catholic people, or that exposure. I always knew that there was Catholics and Protestants, but I didn't hold anything beyond that. And I'm always conscious that if I had the experiences some of my friends have had, or where there's been fatality in the family with the troubles, perhaps maybe I would hold a different thought or experience. I'm grateful that in some ways I haven't been tainted with that, and I've been open-minded.
Yeah, wow, no, amazing, and it's sort of your background there was interesting to hear sort of the comparisons with Matthew's sort of background, his story, and amazing that sort of on this topic of sort of memories and remembering to to hear that sort of not everything's tainted in a way, as you said that word, and not to hear that not all memories have to be bad memories, and it's very interesting just seeing the sort of different ways that things would be interpreted or sort of understood in that time. So just kind of more broadly, these memories of sort of your sharing these backgrounds, what got you to where you are today, how important is it to remember these conflicts? And I don't mean just think about it and think about your own memories, but to remember and share. And in your think particular, we're very interested in sort of building the next generation of peace builders and good relations, as you mentioned there. So what is the importance? I'll just open it to both of you, whoever wants to chip in, but just what's the importance of not only remembering these conflicts, but passing them on to the next generation, especially young people who are naturally coming from these two different sides of the conflict and are maybe not being exposed to sort of the full picture in some cases.
Yeah, that's a good question, Dean. I don't know how important it is or how important it's not, to be honest with you. What I do know is that if we're going to remember those things, we have to be very open-minded in the way that we remember it. If we're remembering things from one point of view or from a certain point of view, that this happened because they did something and this happened because they did that, that kind of remembrance isn't positive. If that's having the sort of negative impact that I suppose that I was exposed to by somebody saying something to me when I was only a young boy in a certain way that made me feel uncomfortable around good people, that kind of remembering isn't good. If we're remembering things and we're giving people an opportunity to walk in somebody else's shoes as well as their own shoes and looking at things from both sides and from different angles and looking at it how it must have been for the person that we're calling the other, then I suppose that kind of remembrance is good. A bit like anything else nowadays, we tend to overdo things. A bit like when I speak of my mother and her simple faith, we don't simplify things anymore. We complicate things. And if we're complicating things and putting bells and whistles on them or remembering just to hurt or annoy somebody else, then that's not good. So the person who wants to remember or is organising the remembrance needs to know their facts and needs to know what they're at and have it well prepared and not leave it that they're going to put anybody, isolate anybody or make anybody have hate or ill feeling towards anybody else. That kind of remembrance isn't any good. So yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about remembering, to be honest with you.
No, it's very interesting perspective, kind of the idea of like if you're remembering, it's important to remember everything. Don't just remember the bits you want to remember. And sort of that's, sometimes the hard bit when it comes to it, especially when you have two sides sort of telling their side of the story. And, you always hear there's always two sides to every story. So maybe more on that, Naomi, just kind of like, sort of the importance of remembering and your views and sort of takes on it, especially for younger people, and what is our responsibility in informing these younger people of what is being remembered actually and what are they taking forward.
Yeah, I think like it's important to help them understand like their culture and their identity, and like in a sense in some ways like our history has shaped us of who we are today as a nation, and it's important in some ways to remember so that we don't repeat history. 6 months ago I went to Bosnia with the Maximobi Foundation, and that was a very evident that they did not want to forget their history of their atrocities that happened out in Bosnia. They don't want history repeating itself again, especially with the younger generation. But I think we also need to be sensitive in how You've mentioned how we share that and sharing both sides of the story. I think also whenever we're working with young people, there's the intergenerational trauma, like in a sense of like what our young people are living through currently at the moment, either through domestic violence, alcoholism, drug addiction, can be traced back to troubles and exposures of that. So it's the legacy that they're currently living in that they might not be aware of, but is a product of the troubles.
Yeah, well, sort of expanding on that point, we're talking about, the responsibilities that we have and sort of the importance, if or if not, how we remember things and how we pass these on. But you've both touched on your faith and your churches, and what about the role of the churches in addressing this conflict? Because obviously it's reached a point here in Northern Ireland where, the church is brought into things sometimes inadvertently, sometimes advertently, and it's a very, very difficult situation. Sometimes it feels like, churches maybe are a bit, would you feel they're a bit hesitant to talk on these topics, or, sort of what role do they have in this responsibility?
Yeah, the churches aren't stepping up, and they should be stepping up. They should be leading by example. Jesus didn't come for having a load of separate churches not working together, and that's not what I have a problem with. But he certainly didn't want churches that don't interact with each other, that are on the same street, and they have nothing to do with each other, and they hide behind different theology, and that's not good enough. The churches can't take leadership in this. It's sad. And just a shout out amongst that to all of the ministers, the clergy, and especially the people on the ground who are the church, that are doing their best to reach out and to feel comfortable and to acknowledge that there was a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, and nobody in this country has a monopoly on that hurt and pain. Sadly, some people were really directly affected by it, and then the rest of us were indirectly affected by that hurt and pain. The churches need to lead that reconciliation. So yeah, they need to step up. They need to work together. Theology's not a good enough excuse for doing that. It's people. And it's people on the ground, so being an example. So when we talk about remembrance, it's remembering that our community experienced a lot of hurt and experienced a lot of pain and a lot of trauma, but so did everybody else. Let's reconcile and let's acknowledge that, and let's make a promise that religion or nationalist or unionist politics, loyalist or Republican politics, don't ever do that to us again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really like your strong point there about kind of, the people on the ground, because even how I phrase that question, it's so easy to think about the church as like, sort of these, in a way we do look to them, but it's so easy to forget that, in fact, whatever church we're a part of, we are the church, and ultimately sometimes if the church isn't reaching out, we sort of have to look at ourselves and realize, well, are we reaching out? How, where are we not sort of representing that? Where are we not leading by example? So no, that's a really good point. And sort of, on to you, Naomi, sort of like, what would your opinions be on that, kind of like the church's role in this?
The church's role is huge, and I think locally and globally they could do so much more and better, and standing up. As clergy, they're shepherds of a flock to an extent, and have such power to lead by example, and to bring people along with them on that journey of reconciliation and working for the common good. And a piece of scripture that comes to my mind is Micah 6:8, and it speaks of acting justly, loving mercifully, and walking humbly with God. And that's not just with God, but with others as well. And I think if, as Christians, we all live by that, I think we would have a much more positive and inclusive country and world.
Absolutely, I really liked how you touch on there. Like, it is obviously we're focusing so much in on Northern Ireland and the importance of that, but it is globally, especially Remembrance Sunday. It's 2 world wars and sort of the global impact of that, and the roles the churches had to play or not to play in that. So I suppose just sort of again, centering again more to Northern Ireland, but specifically centering it here at Youth Link. I've always found since I've joined the organisation, we're in a very unique position. We're a voice in youth work and a presence in youth work, but we also do carry this faith with us and this inter-church unity, and so it puts us in a very sort of, I think anyway, a unique position when it comes to addressing the conflict here and addressing it with that sort of, unified Christian eye. So I suppose, would any of you want to touch on Youth Link's role in this, or what you think Youth Link, what stands out about Youth Link in this discussion, and, what part do they have to play that is possibly different from, maybe the rest of youth work in Northern Ireland?
I think we just have to be deliberate in our approach. Deliberate's not, what's the buzzword at the minute?
Intentional.
Intentional, yeah, I couldn't get it there. Identity kept robbing me of intentional there. So we have to be intentional, we have to be deliberate in everything we do, that we're, I suppose, challenging and testing the beliefs of young people and trying to get them to see things from another point of view, and to walk in somebody else's shoes, while at the same time Christian values that we all share of love, of care, compassion, all the things that are just intertwined in the gospel, all of those values, that we're bringing those to young people, but we're being intentional about, we want you to reach out, and we're going to challenge you to reach out, and we're going to challenge you to meet people that have a different background and a different culture, and hear their story and hear where they're coming from. I've a great belief. I can only speak for myself, but I do think it's the same for everybody else. I think I would have made a good Protestant. I think I'd have been a good unionist. I could have been a loyal subject, and I could have been involved with the Orange Order, and not a huge lover of Gaelic games. So I think we all have it within us to be that other, so why not have a look and see the positives and see the good in what they're doing, instead of seeing the bad. So yeah, as Youth Link, it's challenging young people, testing their beliefs, making them feel a wee bit uncomfortable, because it's through that uncomfortableness that they'll become appreciative, and they'll see another side to the story. I'm all for making the most of what we have here. I want to see this. I want to see where we live prosper. I want to see great facilities. I want to see people working together. I want to see a return to volunteerism. Not from that's a bad choice of words with talking about the conflict, but people helping other people, and all of those things that we can do well. Just people being people, and showing love and care for each other, and that's what we try to bring, even on our bad days when we're going in to meet young people. So we do our best. So that's what would be my hope for Youth Link and for the staff of Youth Link.
And Naomi, sort of your hopes and thoughts for Youth Link, and sort of your view on the important part that they have in all of this?
I think as the Northern Ireland identity or culture is slightly changing, as we're receiving more immigrants coming into the country and visitors, I think the other is slightly changing within our context. And it's a wee bit of what Matthew has spoken about there, about that uncomfortableness. As Youth Link, we have the absolute privilege of being able to facilitate and help build that bridge to establish relationships and hold that space of where people perhaps maybe feel that uncomfortableness. And that's an honour, so it is. It's also a privilege to be able to be on the outsides of churches and come alongside clergy and speaking into some of the work that they're currently doing or need to be doing in the community, and also supporting and helping them in that. So there's definitely a bright future for Youth Link here.
Absolutely. And I think as well we have such an important role to play for all the reasons you mentioned, and just, that unique, almost it feels like we're a crossroads, in sort of youth work and in youth ministry. And I just feel like we Youth Link have the real ability, especially going into this, nearly going into this new year, to really make a positive change and stand out in that. So, well, that's all the time we'll have for today.
I was going to say there, Dean, always good to be a cross, not a bad symbol there.
No.
We don't even need a crossroads, we just need a cross.
Just a cross, absolutely, yes. So if you think can even replicate that, be that cross, we'll be in a better place, absolutely, Matthew. But yes, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciated this, and I think it was a really great and important discussion to have, and it was great to hear sort of your thoughts on that, and especially on how you think can help with that. So I'd like to thank everyone for listening. We hope you all enjoyed, and if not, why don't leave us a wee review and maybe share with others who you think would maybe find this an interesting talk, or maybe someone who you think would benefit from hearing this. And yeah, we wish you all the best for your November, and we will see you next month.